Good day, everyone. My name is Helenique Argeru for Women of Truth. Today we are speaking about a variety of issues that are connected to a wonderful woman who is in a unique field. So these issues and topics that we're going to be covering today are probably new for most of us because we haven't really had many women with her palette of experience and skill set before. And the woman I'm talking about is native to Holland. Her name is Mariette Groot, and she is actually a curator, supervisor, and organizer of various projects related to sound, media, and art. But she's also a shop owner, and she's going to tell us a little bit more about these interesting projects that she runs. But first of all, welcome, Mariette. Lovely to have you here with Women of Truth.
Thank you.
So
nice to be here.
Yeah, I noticed I called you a supervisor without reason, but I think it's because the way I met you is really interesting as a project that you now run through Worm here in Rotterdam, where you are supervising, it feels like, a group of women who are at best amateurs with a whole lot of technological equipment, and you manage to make us feel very comfortable and very disarmed and unoverwhelmed by it all, just by the fact that we have access to all this machinery and you have this role of just coordinating the space so well. It was really interesting then for me to actually find out more about why you do this project, and this is why I wanted us to speak more about it. So can you just tell the group listening a little bit more about what your role is there at Worm and the whole concept of resistor and how it really fits into your bigger life plan?
Yes, sure. So I've worked with Worm for a very long time. Worm has a history of about 20 years by now. It's an art space, venue, production space in Rotterdam, focusing on avant-garde and experimental music, film, performance art, and thereabouts. And ever since 2005, Worm has also had a sound studio with a lot of vintage equipment, analog synthesizers, and tape machines, and various ways of sampling sound and treating effects on sound. And I've always been a bit on the side and not really running that place, but having seen how it was operated, I felt it was too much the domain of arrived artists, so to speak, that have, for instance, some time on their hands to record an album, and they maybe come from abroad and then be in the studio for a week and record their album, or on commission make a radio play for Worm, which Worm also has a budget for, to make radio productions, like radio plays. And somehow it always turned out to be a bit like a fortress, like there are the artists doing their thing. Usually they will already have some knowledge about how analog synthesizers work, how do you trigger all those knobs, and I felt it should be more accessible and more open towards people who were kind of new in that world, but had interest, and but would need some more introduction and some more playing around with the stuff before they knew it was what they liked and if they would want to go on with it. So I started this group a year ago, supported by Worm, by the director and also by the coordinator of the studio, to have one day in a month where everyone who would be able to come in, learn a bit about how the machines and the instruments work, learn a bit about how recording these things on a computer, also about playing together. You know, for many people, music is something others do, or that you consume but not so much produce, and let alone create with the group and improvise. So we've done that for a year now. Every first Sunday of the month we get together. It's usually a group of up to 10 people, and the group is growing. And we've also from there started various projects. Like some people had a click together and loved playing around with little percussive instruments or with other things, and formed a duo or a trio. So they've also already done performances in other venues. Other people have kind of used it for as inspiration for their specific own projects. One of the group is an organizer of a modular synth event in The Hague, and last year we did a showcase there with 7 women on that festival. And yeah, that's, I'm mentioning women, and maybe I didn't really mention it right up till now, but I was really focusing on girls and women and queer, trans people who are basically, in my opinion, an underrepresented group in electronic music, and who I also felt were underrepresented in those studio sessions. I was talking about the artists, and especially in the world of electronic music, most of them are men. It's very slowly changing, but still, when you go to festivals of electronic music and large events, it's, at the best, it's 80% men, 20% women, but often it's even less women. And so I could see that reflected in the studio, and I've done some research and done some projects with other people where we try to find out why that is, and there are all sorts of reasons that maybe we can talk about later. But so I focused the group on women and girls, and to give you an example, this showcase at this modular synth event last year was quite exceptional in that these festivals tend to be filled with people twiddling knobs on their own, or like at the most as a duo, and mostly men. So when you suddenly see 7 women twiddling knobs together and improvising and having a good flow together, that's kind of a phenomenon. People are looking like, hey, yeah, that it's something unusual in that scene. So it was basically a statement in its own, and I didn't maybe not so much realize in how far that was a statement, but people apparently experienced it as a statement, like, it is possible. And even people with very little experience that just like the sound of a specific thing, and just let themselves get carried away by it, and listen to others and see how they fit in with the sound of the whole. That's something so magical. But to cut the story short, when I started the group, I hadn't expected it to be so vibrant and so well received, because new people keep flowing in and saying, I want to participate, or at least discover what it's about, and that group's called Resistor. It's by now a group of about 20 people, and we have several small or big projects running. And at some point, we might also be able to get some funding either via Worm or via a different way to also do more about our own education, to invite artists that we think are interesting, preferably female artists, of course, to share their expertise with us and inspire us, and maybe do projects with us, perform with us, and because basically all of us are, I guess you could say, in different levels amateurs. And maybe, I don't know, I also don't mind myself. I consider an amateur in music making. I'm a professional in other things, but I'm an amateur as a musician. But I've done a lot and played around a lot, and it's also not so very relevant whether you at some point would become a professional, but that at some point you would feel that sound and music is a world that you feel at home in, and that is carrying you and helping you to express what you'd like to express. That would be fantastic, and that's the main thing I say, because there's I think that's it for now. A very long answer to your question, I would say.
I'm very glad you gave such a comprehensive picture, though, because it's something quite unique, and it comes from a very heartfelt place of wanting to be inclusive and supportive, so that people have sound as a pathway and a form of expression and an equal opportunity to explore this incredible world of artistic medium like sound. So I myself spent so long in it that I respect it so much, and that's why I think I'm moved by it, because I think to make sound accessible in different ways is a wonderful thing. It's like human beings all need different ways to play, and the creative process is so important, whether you do it on whatever level of involvement. So making it inclusive and helping people be more involved, and then to do it in such a unique and interesting way through Worm, which I know the way you explained it, avant-garde, is so beautiful, because it is quite a unique collective, and I didn't know it was around for 20 years, so really good to know that there's been an interest in the city to also support the creativity of its citizens, in this way. And truly, it has been an interesting space for me to be involved in, and I've seen the women coming in who are all very unique in their own right. So well done to all of you for putting it all together and for letting us know about it, because these kinds of unique outlets and opportunities to maybe even, as you say, use the space to record radio are really valuable and alternative ways, unique ways to express, reach out, put your message out, but to also learn and gather like-mindedness, So I'm always interested in those kinds of original pathways that are not the standard commercial or expectable ones. So you explained it so beautifully that there's also a really interesting take on the word resistor. So resistor radio and resistor is the way that it's written, just for people who haven't seen the logos connected. And it does then speak about how do we as a collective or as a group of changing dynamic people moving in and out feel about changing something in the system somehow. So maybe this is really what we wanted to kind of feed into our interview today. So I want to ask you more about it a little later on. But for now, can you tell us, for you, Mariette, as a person in Holland, living as you did, is there any kind of breakthrough experience that you had in your life that you'd be willing to share with us that really changed the way you look at life, or showed you something about your own journey that we can understand through maybe a lesson that you learned or something that you got from that breakthrough experience?
Yeah, I have to say, if you would ask me how long have you been working as a professional in the music scene, that goes back quite a long time. It goes back to early 90s when I started a record shop. And I have to admit that for a long time I was aware of this balance in the music world. I had this record shop, but I didn't know of any other female record shop owners. Also, the people that came there and still do, the record collectors, are also mostly men. the people going to concerts, the people on stage, the people in the press writing about music. I noticed it, but I never asked myself questions about it. I thought, okay, that's how it is, but I'm just doing my thing, and I manage. And then a friend of mine, or I got a friend in around 2004, who was also active in the music scene, the electronic scene, and she wanted to start a festival or a series of concerts with electronic music, but only female artists. And she had this idea in mind. She'd always been a very politically very active person and very engaged, and she wanted it to get that. She wanted to realize that in Rotterdam, and asked me for help organizing it, applying for funding, production, curation, publicity, etc. So we did that series for a few years together. And there was a funny moment where the city council said, yeah, it's an interesting project, we're going to give you some money for it, but only for the artistic aspect, and because we in our opinion, emancipatory questions are no longer relevant. The emancipation of women has been realized, so we don't see a need for that. And that was such a weird argument, like, as if, if you would just look at the numbers and I'm only focusing on the music, you have to focus on something. And I know that in every section of society, education, literature, the business world, it's the same everywhere. The women in leadership is what your mission is, or your focus is. Women in leadership are lacking in all sorts of branches. But for me, in music, it's still very clear that for several reasons, men are always at the top. And even if you go back in history, if you just as a test, just Google the word great composers, and then you get the whole row of all the great composers that we acknowledge as the canon of the great composers. There were female composers, but they're not in that list of great composers. And so to say in 2005, as an organ of as a body of culture, cultural causes in a city, to say that there's no need to do anything about that anymore is kind of weird. That was one thing. And then purely the fact that this friend of mine kind of triggered also more awareness in me about to think, okay, it's like that, but why does it, I mean, the fact that it is like this doesn't mean that it cannot change. And wouldn't it be better if it would change? And so basically it was also a way to research into these topics. And that's, I think then the seed was sown. I could say, because I'm not one for being on barricades and leading demos and marching the streets for more equality, but it kind of triggered me to be much more aware afterwards of when it comes to curatorship, that you really that you try to break away from these old stereotypical patterns. So curatorship for me is not only booking artists and organizing events, which I do, but also in my shop. It's a mobile shop for books and records. I also try to bring that message in, like, you know, the great pioneers in inventing, for instance, electronic instruments and making electronic music might seem to be mostly male, but there were lots of females also at work there, also in computer science. But for some reason, they were always kind of either disacknowledged or pushed pushed to the background because of, yeah, how can you say, it's a mixture of how people are born and raised. It's power mechanisms that have to be protected by people in power. It's networks. It's nature and nurture, and all these kind of things kind of help together to keep things in place as they are. And of course, you probably also know from your experience that there are things changing very slowly, very gradually here and there, but not as quickly and not as thoroughly as you might hope. Several situations still kind of make you think that you're even sometimes thrown back in history again, or that it's totally, that nothing is really changing. There are like sparks of hope, but so yeah, to go back to your question, the life-changing thing, or the epiphany that for me kind of brought me to the work I've done since then was basically, yeah, let's say 15 years ago when I first started organizing events with electronic artists, only women on stage. And the insights I got from this friend of mine who put the finger on the sore spot, so to say.
Yeah. And so what did you learn about all that?
What I learned is that it takes different ways of looking at the world around you. And, you know, my main world is the world of music and sound and everything that's around that. And that arguments that you hear, like, yeah, I would like to have more women on stage, but I cannot find them. Or an argument like, I only look at the quality of an artist and not at the gender. Those arguments are usually totally insincere and worthless, because it kind of departs from the position that you as a curator, for instance, are just are like a machine saying, you know, I have 10 people here with equal qualities, and I will make a random choice, and then we have 50-50 balance between male and female, or anything in between, because there are so many more mechanisms that are at work. It's not only there's not only it's also not about the good guys and the bad guys. It works several ways. So you can say it's the oppressors, but it's also the readiness for people to have themselves being oppressed. I'm not sure if that's good English,
Yeah.
but
I agree with you on that. I think it's very central. how we allow that as well, not just
Mm-hmm.
as a young girl. Mariette, were you always like this, very interested in seeing the equality, or were you looking at the world differently? This next question is about who you became now and the kind of advice that you would give your younger self at 8 years old, maybe the little Mariette running around. What would you tell her about the world? How would you prepare her, advise her from what you know now?
Oh, well, I must say, I've never been a very strongly focused person on that. I'd always kind of that I had a clear picture of where I wanted to go in my professional career. So as an 8-year-old, I was a dreamy kid and not really thinking about the future or what I'd like to be. Um, but I grew up in quite a traditional family, and I remember that my mother said, "Well, you know, after school, it might be a good idea to maybe follow a secretary's training because there's always work in that, or something in nursing." Um, and I don't know, I wasn't the type to start resisting. I don't want to be a secretary. It was more that I just kept kind of dreaming on. and, so, yeah, what would I say to an 8-year-old girl? Um, I would say anything is possible, and don't just take things for granted as in the way they are presented to you. Um,
Beautiful. So if you look now at the, the way that women operate, we just ended on that powerful note that anything is possible, and that also sometimes women allow, or we also have something on the inside that allows us to hang out maybe in a place where we think things are not possible. So let me ask you the question in a full way again, if you were to answer this, with those things in mind, obviously, or maybe you would come back to them, is what do you think really makes the women deceive themselves? And how do they do it? And then what's the truth? So what are we lying to ourselves about, or what does a normal woman go out into the world believing that's not really true, and then end up having to kind of realize much later and learn things that are more closer to the truth? So what would you say is the biggest lie women believe, and what's the truth?
the biggest lie is probably thinking um, thinking that there are things that you are not able to do, like or just assuming, looking at others, seeing others doing things so well, to think that they don't need me in this world, or I would never be capable of doing such a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Hey, cats.
uh, because basically it's a mixture of other people wanting you to believe that, and but also something that you are telling yourself out of lack of self-confidence.
Brilliant. You just like nailed it, like in, in one sentence. So I hope you all hear that. It's your own self-confidence that takes you out to do stuff. What about this whole women's movement, Mariette? There's been a century of it, actually. I had so many mixed feelings about it. I wanted to hear what other women think. There's so many women's movements, so many things going on in the world for women. There's been lots of lobbying for women's rights for such a long time. And we are still here. And yet now we see some incredible momentum lately. Certainly in gatherings I've been to, there's a lot of women that are beginning to really step up and elevate the game. What do you think about it? And is there anything you would add?
What exactly do you mean? Do you mean the political movement?
In the women entrepreneurship field, there's so much happening now for women to set up businesses, for women to be recognized. There's a lot of statistical research on the impact women make in businesses when they're hired, when they're involved in peace treaties. There's a lot of research about how neglected or badly treated women are in the medical profession. There's a lot of awareness around women's needs. The whole Me Too campaign came in. There's a lot of ways that we are addressing women's issues, yet we still have the same problems, lots of inequality, lots of injustice, and lots of violation to women and their bodies. So when we look at that whole picture, what do you think about it? And what would you add to it?
I would add stand up for your cause and for your true beliefs, and don't hold back. But also be aware that, as you and I said before, it always takes two to tango, right? So don't try to victimize womanhood as a whole, but also see how somehow you're yourself not a collaborator, but you participate in a structure that's ingrained so deeply, and that it's not only it's both sides of society that have to work on this. It's not only like we go out onto the street and we demand others to solve it for us, but you have to also basically maybe put it clearer, it's not only demanding things but also offering things. It's by trying to create more awareness and by pointing out injustice. You can don't forget to emphasize how much better the world would be for all sides. And it's not only like now it's time for women to dominate, but more let's make it more in more of a constructive dialogue where everyone will have a better life.
Beautiful. Thank you. This is a chance for you to tell us a little bit more about what you're most passionate about in your life and what we can look forward to. You spoke about curating before, all these projects you run, Resistor. What would you say is your passion right now?
Phew. It sometimes tends to feel quite dispersed for me, that there's so much passions, be it literature, philosophy, art. I also kind of tend sometimes to see the overestimation of art as being the solution to everything, which I also think is not.
Wow.
I mean, I think art it's an essential part of life, but it's not something that's going to solve everything. But then to bring it back to my own direct practice, I would say my true passion at the moment is sound and everything it implies. Sound as environment, sound as an element to turn into music, to turn into art. Sound as how you communicate with others, and sound is very direct, a direct sensation that's much more, that can have much more impact than the most beautiful painting or film or yeah, I think at the end of the day, sound and music, making music, listening to music, and participating in music is my greatest passion.
I can hear it. And it's something I share. So yes, I totally
Great.
feel that. Thank you so much for putting it out so strongly and doing it in your unique way. What are your 3 words that you would leave behind as memoirs or power statements that can either be connected or they can be 3 separate words that just let us know what's really important to you, Mariette?
Love, respect, um, um, so the third word is the hardest. I would say love, respect, and wisdom.
Beautiful. So with love, respect, and wisdom as the main focus points for you in your world, and this great passion that you have for sound, and looking deeply into how you make access to all people and how you give people access to sound and the use of sound as a medium is really what I think is so unique about you, and very helpful for us to know that there are ways that we can actually express ourselves that we might not know anything about, and that just by having someone around that's very inclusive about that, there's an opportunity to get involved and have that in your own access. So that's really great. Thank you so much for making time to talk with me, and we wish you the best with all your projects, and I'll be seeing you soon because we collaborate and do great things together. So yeah, have a lovely day, and thanks everyone for watching. It was really great to spend this time again with you.
Thank you for your interest and for your invitation. It was a great honor to be in your series.
Thank you, Mariette. Great for me too. Okay, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.